So, lesson 9, part 2. Sorry, David, did I misunderstand? No, can you clarify your comment? I'm not sure if that was directed to me. No, I can't. You can't delete the messages. We'll just scroll up and um, we'll just learn. It'll be a learning experience for all of us. Okay, yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the ability in the WebEx chat. That's okay. We'll know moving forward. Okay, so let's talk for a minute. If we want to enable this kind of functionality that are showing you from yeah, I think we can. I'm not going to spend any more time on it. I've said my piece. Okay. So we want to implement this kind of functionality that I've got here from my other class into our site. So here's the one, and here's our PHP gaming site. So what things do we need in order to take our fully public site with no authentication and turn it into a site like this, where we're controlling access and only authenticated users have the ability to change data? What will we need to do? There's a bunch of components we're going to have to add to our project. Any thoughts on what we'll need to do here? In order to get from here to here? Okay, apparently not. Well, I guess we'll just dive into it then. Yes, we are going to need a user system. So we're going to need a place to store users. That's one. We're going to need some way for them to authenticate, which means we're going to need a login page. We're going to need a register page so people can create accounts for themselves. We're going to need some logic in our navigation bar, right? And then we're also going to need some logic here on our list page that will check if our user's logged in or not. So once I log in, I get a different view of the page. So our first step is to create a spot in the database to hold our user accounts. So I'm going to make sure you're connected to the VPN. Let's connect to our database on AWS in Workbench, because we're going to need to build a users table. So you'll run your use command, and then you can just copy this script off of Blackboard, paste it in, run the script, and this will build a table with 3 columns. User ID, which will be a number that the database generates automatically, the username, and the password. Go ahead and run that script in your AWS database. And then we should talk about the password field for a minute. Kind of important. I'm going to go back to our Miro board because Michael talked about encrypting data. Notice the size of the password field. How come it's 255 characters? Is somebody going to enter a 255 character password that they can remember? What should we do with the passwords that people enter when they sign up for our site? How do we protect them? Okay, so Colton, you've said encrypt them with hashing. Okay, you're on the right track. So Michael mentioned encryption. Now, hashing and encryption, they're sort of the same, but not exactly, right? So encryption would be something, so something like, we have a value like, let's say password. And eventually we want it to look something like this, right? So we want to convert it into something that's not human readable. So both hashing and encryption do this, but there's an important difference between hashing and encryption, and it's really critical we understand the difference. We actually want to hash the passwords rather than encrypt them. How come? What is the difference between hashing and encryption? Similar things, but there's one really important distinction that you need to know.
I don't know. I was an hour late.
Give you a hint.
Huh?
No, I can't. Chris, you'll have to use the chat. Your audio doesn't seem to be working, or your mic doesn't seem to be working. You guys can hear it. That's weird. Can someone else try to use their mic for a minute? Say hello.
Yeah, hello.
Okay, Colton, I don't hear you either. I'm not sure why. I'll check my audio settings. Okay, well, that could have something to do with it.
Hello there.
Let me check my audio. I'm using the computer, which is what I typically use.
Everybody, welcome to podcast in PHP. While the professor attempts to sort himself out. Today we are learning about encryption and authentication. It is a lovely day. I really hope you can.
Okay, yeah, I can hear you.
This is good. Oh God, okay. Hi, bye. Okay, bye. I started a podcast.
Okay, so the other's partly working. So encryption has an opposite. What's the opposite of encryption? Right, we've got decryption. So any value that we can encrypt, so we take text like password, if we can encrypt it, it's going to look like this. But any value that we encrypt, we can also decrypt. So encryption is a two-way process. We can convert plain text to some kind of random string, but we can also convert it back. Hashing is one way. It converts from plain text to some kind of obscure text, but there are no there's no methods for unhashing. This is why websites, what happens on most websites if you forget your password? Will most websites be able to show you your password if you forget it? Or do they ask you to do something else? Right, there's a password reset option. And the reason why the passwords are reset is because they're typically hashed. They can't be converted back, and that's for extra security. So hashing is safer because there's no way to convert this back into the original value. So we are going to use hashing, which is the reason why our password field is so big. Okay, so we can encrypt, but hashing is what's recommended for passwords. Okay, so we've built our users table. I already have a users table, so I'm not going to recreate it because I only have one database. And you can use this same users table in your assignment. It's fine, that the user table we're building in class. So our next thing we need register and login forms. Now, we've already built lots of forms, so we're not going to take the time to build them. These are just straight HTML. So if you open up the register form, we're actually just going to copy this. So I'm going to copy all the HTML. So it's includes our header and footer, and then it's just a pretty basic form. I'm going to close up. I've got so many files open now. Maybe I'll just close everything for now. So in my PHP gaming site, I'm going to make a new PHP file called register. I'm going to delete all the HTML that's here. So it's just an empty file. And then I'm going to paste in the HTML from Blackboard. And I'll save that. So I haven't made any changes to it. It's basically just a standard form. The only new thing here is I've used a regular expression to set the pattern so that the password is a minimum of 8 characters. It has to include at least one number, one lowercase, and one uppercase character. So if I try this out, I can go to register. So this is what happens when we include file. Failed to open stream, because at the bottom I have a footer, and we're not using a footer in this site. So I'll just take out my include call on line 29. I'll just go down to the bottom. We'll get rid of the footer and just actually replace it with end body and end HTML. So there we go. There's our register page. And I'll just fix up the login.php. So now I'm going to download the code for the login page as well. So if you're joining late, we didn't do any coding in the first hour. So all the code we're using, we've used so far, we've just copied from lesson 9. We ran this script in our MySQL database, and we're just downloading the HTML for our register and login pages. So now I want you to make an empty login.php, and again, just grab the code from Blackboard It's basically the exact same form, except there's no confirm password box on this one. So we'll make a new PHP file called login. Again, I'm going to delete everything in it and just paste in the code from Blackboard. So now I've got a login form as well. We can now enable these links we put in our navbar last week. We added register and login links, but they don't go anywhere. So we can enable the proper href properties so that these two links are active. So we'll go down to I'm going to open up my header. And we can see on line 23 and 26, here's the register and login links. So we can just change the href attribute. This one will now go to register. This one will go to login. So this should make these links active now. So I just threw the change in the chat. All I did was modify the two href attributes, the register and login. Sorry, there they are in the chat. So now I can navigate to either of my pages. I'm going to make one other little change. I don't want these links in the main navigation. I want register and login to appear over here on the right in this space. So I'm going to put these two links, right now they're inside of our UL, class of navbar nav. I'm going to put these in a separate list that I can align over to the right. So after my R games link, I'm going to end this UL. If I use navbar nav, I think it's MS auto. So I'm going to end my first UL and add my second UL. So this should divide our navbar into the links on the left with our register and login links pushed over to the right. So so these are now over here. So they're not part of the main navigation really. I'm going to make one other small change. I know I was fiddling with this last week, figured it out after class. Our input boxes don't look very good all jammed together. We want to add a little bit of padding here. So we can do this through our style sheet. In both the register and login forms, I've used these field sets with the class of form group. So I could add some padding. I could override this style in our style sheet and add a little bit of padding. So I'm going to open up under my CSS. Oh, we don't have any of our own custom CSS. Okay, well, we'll fix that. So let's make our own custom style sheet. In the CSS folder, I'll make a new style sheet. I'll just call it styles.css. And I'm going to override form group. So I'll maybe try 10 pixels of padding. So wherever we're using this form group class, we'll get a little bit of padding on all sides. And now we want to include this style sheet in our header. So any other custom styles we put in, if we want to override, for example, colors or fonts, we can customize our own style sheet. So we're still using Bootstrap, but we can modify it. So now I'll go to header. So we're using Bootstrap style sheet and Bootstrap JavaScript, as well as our own style sheet and our own JavaScript. So we're leveraging what we can from Bootstrap with our own customizations on top. So now I get some padding here. Looks a little better. That our form's a bit spaced out. Totally optional, not really PHP based, but we're trying to work with Bootstrap to format our site so it looks half decent. Okay, so I've linked to my custom style, and I've put that custom style definition in the chat as well. Again, you don't have to do this, or you could just set top padding, bottom padding. You can also change the values. If you think that's spaced too far apart, shrink it down. Whatever you like. Now, these pages aren't yet functional. We've created a table in the database. We've got forms for registering and login. But if I fill out my user registration form right now, let's see, I'll do Wednesday, gc.ca. Right, if this happens, I'm going to get a 404 error. Why do we get a 404? Well, let's look. Here's our register page. You'll notice on line 8, I've got some yellow highlighting here. It's highlighted in yellow because our registration form is posting and it's looking for a page called Save Registration. Well, this page we haven't built yet. So this generates a 404 error. It takes us off to our 404 page. We can't submit to Save Registration until we build that file. So that's going to be our next task. Build this page that will create a new user account. So I can either create the file manually, or I can use my code prompt. Very neat PHP Storm says, okay, this file doesn't exist, but I've got a little link here. If I click it, it'll automatically generate a file with this name. And I'm all for doing things as efficiently as possible, so let's click it. Create the file. And it gives me this blank page called Save Registration. Just like on all our other pages, I'm going to replace the code at the top with our header. So our title can be registering. And we'll inject our header up at the top of the page. Now, almost all the code we need to create a user, we already know how to do. We're going to connect to the database. We're going to write an insert command. We'll fill our parameters, username and password, and we'll save to the database. We'll execute that command. So this is stuff we're already doing. The only new thing on this page is going to be this part. Rather than just saving the plain password, we're going to hash it. So that's going to be the one thing that we'll have to do that we haven't done before. So we'll capture form inputs. We'll validate them. So we'll want to make sure the username was entered, the password was entered, and that the two password values match. Connect. Set up SQL. Hash password. And fill parameters. Execute. And disconnect. And then lastly, we'll redirect to the login page. So once someone signs up, we'll take them to the login screen so they can log in with their new account. So here are all the steps. So of all of this stuff, hashing the password is the only new thing. Everything else on here we've done before. We did it in class. You did it in assignment 1. So we'll use our post collection to get the username, the password, and the confirm values. And I'll add a little variable that we used before called OK. We're going to default the value to true. So until we find an error, OK will be set to true. So there's the first chunk. Absolutely nothing new here. We've got 3 inputs on our form called username, password, and confirm. We're going to read each one and store the value in a variable that has the exact same name. We're going to check each one. So if our username is empty, we'll say username is required. And we'll change our OK value from true to false. We're going to do the exact same thing with the password. For our third value for confirm, we actually want to check that confirm and password are the same. So we'll say if password does not equal confirm. So we can try the page out this way. I'm not going to save anything yet, but we can check our validation and make sure that it's working. I can even put all this up on Pastebin right now so we can check it. So I'll put in a username, but I'm going to put in 2 different passwords, for example. So you can see my passwords are different. And I get a passwords must match error. If I put in 2 passwords that are the same, I shouldn't get any error at all. No message at all. And we're not really doing anything new here. Any questions so far from anybody? Or so far what we're doing on this page makes sense? Yes, ideally we could use some JavaScript for that. I'm going to leave it out for now. If we have time, we can look at it next week. So yes, I suppose we could do that even up here if you wanted to, either beside the password, or we could put it in here even. Let's see. Let's have an h2 class equals alert info password must have 1 digit password rules min 8 characters 1 digit 1 upper 1 lowercase letter. There's the kind of the cheater's way, David. We could do a script that will actually check. Oh, that's a little big. Maybe an H. I'll put that in the chat. Maybe like an H4. Yeah, even that's big. There are JavaScripts you can find. I've implemented them before where it will check as you type and, go from red to orange to green, for example. I can point you to a link where you can do that if you want to. We probably don't have time in class to implement it. So here's that alert if you want it. That's kind of the quick and dirty way of, you're right, we should tell users what's expected. Fair enough. So if all is good, so if we're okay, we want to do all this other stuff. Including connecting to the database, which is much easier with our include file now. We can just include our SQL insert. We're going to insert into users, username and password. We don't need to insert the confirm value. That's only for checking that they entered the same password twice. We're not actually going to save two versions of the password to the database. So we'll create two parameters, username and password. First, we're going to hash the password. And PHP has a nifty function we can call called password hash. And it takes two parameters. What is the value, the plain text value we're going to hash? And then there's different hashing algorithms of different strength. We're going to use password default, which is the current recommended algorithm. So that's going to convert whatever password the user's entered into a unique string. It guarantees uniqueness, and we'll test this out. So even if we have multiple people that use the same password in the database, each one has a unique value. Then we'll create, like usual, our command object that we prepare with our connection and our SQL. And then we want to bind, we need to fill the username and the password. And both of them are going to be strings. So we said 50 characters for the username. For the password, right now, this hashing algorithm, the current default creates a password that's actually 128 characters. But to future-proof it, in case the hashing algorithm changes and we need to allow longer passwords, we're going to use 255 instead. So our password's going to get hashed, converted to like this random string before we save it. So then we'll call execute to save. And we'll disconnect. I'm going to leave out the redirect for a minute because I want to make sure this code works before we take the user away to the login screen. So we're going to capture the inputs. We're going to check them all. And if they're okay, we're going to connect. I have a typo here. We're going to insert into users. I was missing a T on the word insert. We want to convert the password with hashing. And then we want to save the new user to the database. So I'm going to try this out. I'll put it up on GitHub in a minute. So I'm going to create a user. I'll say Wednesday@gc.ca. And so that you don't have to remember credentials, I'm going to recommend we all try the same user account. Let's do wed@gc.ca, and the password can be test1234 with a capital T. You don't have to do this, but if we all use the same account, then no one will have to remember their login next week. So if this works, I should just have basically a blank page. Okay, well, that's encouraging. Didn't get an error. So now if I go to Mysql Workbench, I can select star from users. And here's my Wednesday@gc.ca, and you can see the hashing. my password, it's actually 128 characters, I think. Maybe it's not that long. Let's see. How long is this? So it actually gives me a 60 character password right now when we hash it that way. So I'll just show you, I'll post the code in a minute to GitHub. What happens if I create another account and I use the same password? So I'm going to register again. Som1@gc.ca. I'll use that same password of test1234. And if we look in the database, you'll notice the start of the password is the same, $2Y, $10, but the rest of it is different. So when it hashes, it creates like a unique key value, a unique string that's used in that generation. So this way we can ensure no two values in the database will be the same, even when I enter the exact same password twice. The last thing I'll do here is now add my redirect. So after I sign up, we want to take the user to the login screen. Okay, it is 12:52. I'm going to push all of this up to GitHub. So if there's any of the code that you need for today, you've got access to all of it. So the script to create your tables on Blackboard, you only have to run it once. I'm going to push what we've done so far up today. It's lesson 9, part 1, register. Anything you need has been uploaded to GitHub. Same repository as usual, but I'll put the link in the chat. So if you're a bit behind, you can compare what you've got to what's in the repository. I'm going to stop the recording and we'll take a pause and we'll come back in 10 minutes and we'll want to work on our user login. We won't finish all of this today. That's okay. We will be able to continue next week. So we'll be back in 10.